My name is Letitia, and for a long time, I thought that silence was a form of mature love, but really, it was just the cruelest way the narcissist found to control me. It all started slowly, as it always does, with soft gestures, sure compliments, that stare that makes you believe you've found someone special. The narcissist was charming. I knew what to say, how to listen to myself, how to make me feel unique, and I, lacking affection, dove right in. But the enchantment did not last. Soon came the silences. First short, disguised as tiredness. Then longer and longer, heavier. The narcissist didn't have to yell at me. He punished me with emptiness. There was a day that never left my memory. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. I talked to him about a dream I had, something silly, funny. No response. I kept talking, trying to get a smile. Nothing. He remained seated, looking at his cell phone as if I wasn't there. I asked, "Did you hear me?" The narcissist got up, took the keys, and walked out the door without saying a word. I stood still, with my hand still holding the cup, trying to understand what I had done wrong. And that was the worst part. I always thought it was my mistake. I tortured myself trying to remember every sentence from the day before, every look, every gesture. I couldn't accept that someone would simply decide to ignore me as a form of punishment. But the narcissist did that, and he did it perfectly. He knew that silence destroyed me more than any scream. He knew that, without words, my mind would do the work for him. I created 1,000 theories. I cried in secret. I apologized for things I didn't even know if I had done. His silence became a constant presence in the house. We were in the same environment, but I felt like I was alone. We slept in the same bed, and even so, I felt invisible. Sometimes I spoke softly just to test if he would react. Other times, I didn't even try anymore. It was like walking through an emotional graveyard. And when I finally broke down and asked, "Why are you ignoring me?" he would roll his eyes and say, "You always make drama. I need peace, not an insecure woman in my ear." And then came the guilt. I really thought I was insecure. I thought it was exaggerated, that maybe I was suffocating. The narcissist was a master at this, making me believe that the problem was always me. I started to change to try to please. I stopped talking about myself. I kept quiet at dinners. I stopped going out with my friends. I stopped being who I was, all to avoid that cruel silence. Because it wasn't just the absence of a voice, it was the absence of me within the relationship. I remember one night that broke me inside. I came home from work, exhausted, and yet I stopped by his favorite restaurant. I bought the dish he liked the most. I entered the house. The narcissist was on the couch, with his gaze far away. I said with affection, "I brought your favorite." He didn't even turn his face. I put the food on the table, opened the packages, arranged everything carefully. He got up, passed me as if I were wind, and locked himself in the room. I sat at the table, alone, with no appetite, with a knot stuck in my chest, the food cooling down in front, and I was trying to hold back the tears, because he said that crying was manipulation. "You use your tears to control me," he said, and I believed it. I believed so much that I started to blame myself even for feeling. The narcissist did not scream. He killed me in silence. And that worked, because it made me insecure, anxious, always alert. I started to anticipate myself, saying sorry for everything, to do everything for him, just to avoid the next punishment. His silence was a punishment. It was an invisible wall between us, and every time he lifted her up, I cringed more inside. I didn't even know who I was. I swear to you, there was a moment when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize my face anymore. The woman I once was, she was gone. The narcissist shaped every part of me with that cruel silence. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to break anything or betray myself. It was enough to keep silent. And I knew exactly what that meant. I was being punished. I just didn't know why. And that was what hurt the most. Sometimes, after days of ignoring me, he would come back as if nothing had happened. A kiss on the neck, a smile on my face. "I missed you," said as if he hadn't made me cry myself to sleep the night before. And I accepted, because any crumb from it was a relief after the void. I clung to these crumbs, as if they were proofs of love. But love does not ignore. Love does not silence. Love doesn't erase you little by little. I remember when my mother came to visit me. The narcissist treated me like a princess in front of her, attentive, polite, talkative. When she left, she hugged me and said softly, "You're lucky, see?" I smiled, but inside I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell you that the day before he spent 48 hours without saying my name, that I apologized for crying, that I slept on the couch so as not to bother him. I couldn't speak, because no one would believe it, because silence also isolated me from people. The narcissist didn't say, "Don't talk to your sister," or "Stop hanging out with your friends." He only frowned when I said I was going to see them. He stopped answering me when I got home. He slept facing the other side, and I learned to avoid these provocative behaviors. Even the clothes became a reason. If I dressed up too much, silence. If I put on makeup, silence. If I smiled at someone at the market, days without talking to me, everything turned into punishment, an emotional control system that kept me in place. There was a night when I couldn't stand it. I sat on the bathroom floor with the towel still on my body and started sobbing. It was a silent cry, afraid that he would hear it and use it against me. I trembled, alone, and all I wanted was to be heard. One word, a gesture, something that said I mattered, but on the other side of the door, silence. The narcissist was watching TV, or pretending that he was, because he knew I was there, broken, and he didn't move. It didn't come. He said nothing. That was his answer. It always was. After that, I started losing weight, not for aesthetics, but because anxiety took over my appetite. There were nights when my throat would freeze. I couldn't swallow. The pain of being ignored was physical. It hurt in my stomach. It hurt in my chest. I lived waiting for the moment when the silence would begin again, as if I were living under constant threat. And the worst thing is that no one saw it. On the outside, the narcissist was a calm, balanced, humorous man. I was the woman who got lucky. I was the exaggerated, the emotional, the sensitive, and I started to believe that. I began to think that maybe I really deserved that punishment, that maybe I was hard to love. One day, I had the courage to say, "You hurt me when you ignore me." He looked at me with contempt and replied, "You who do yourself harm, alone, grow up." That destroyed me, because that was it. I was alone even in my pain. And him? The narcissist just kept going as if nothing had happened, as if I was just another noise in his routine. After that day, I stopped trying to talk, not because I accepted, but because I gave up. I gave up being heard, of trying to explain how his silence corroded me inside. The narcissist always found a way to turn everything against me. If I cried, it was drama. If I spoke, it was criticism. If I asked for attention, it was suffocating. So I kept quiet. I kept quiet to survive. And the most painful thing is that he realized this and liked it. The quieter I became, the freer he seemed. He started to go out more, coming back late, not giving satisfaction. When I asked him where he had been, he would answer with a simple, "It doesn't matter," or worse, he would turn his back. It was as if my place in his life was that of an extra, mute, submissive, decorative. The narcissist knew exactly where to hit me. He made a point of reminding me that I was not a priority. If I got sick, it was freshness. There was a day when I had a high fever and couldn't get out of bed. I sent him a message at work, asking him to bring some medicine. He visualized. He did not answer. He came home late, with a bag of beer and a mocking smile. He didn't look at me. It went straight. He slept on the couch and locked the room. I shivered with cold and fear, and yet I thought, maybe I'm really exaggerating. The little things have become invisible knives. A good morning that he did not answer. A touch that he pushed away. A dinner that I prepared and he ignored. My every gesture was ignored with surgical precision, as if he taught me, little by little, that I should not expect reciprocity. Only obedience. Only silence. And I obeyed. I started walking around the house as a guest. It avoided noise. He avoided asking. I avoided talking about myself. I became a woman of soft gestures, who measured every word, because the price of being who I was, it was his silence, and I couldn't stand being ignored anymore. My friends began to notice. One of them called me one day, worried. I said my voice was different, more muted. I didn't talk. She said she was just tired of work. Lie. I was tired of existing around someone who punished me for trying to love. The narcissist had the gift of making me feel like a burden. as if his mere presence was a favor. And the worst thing is that, over time, I started to believe. I started to think that maybe I really wasn't that interesting, that maybe I was boring, jealous, too emotional. He repeated this so many times that I internalized it, and his silence was proof. If he didn't answer me, it was because I didn't deserve an answer. One day, I went to try to vent. We were lying down in silence as always. I turned to him and said, almost in a whisper, "Do you know that when you look like this, without talking to me, I feel dead inside?" The narcissist did not react. He stared at the ceiling, and after a few seconds he said, "You always victimize yourself. I'm not responsible for your feelings." That hurt like a slap. I was opening my heart, saying that something was killing me, and he said it was my fault, and the silence returned, even colder. From then on, even my health began to crumble. Insomnia, anxiety, crises, tachycardia, and a sadness that stuck to me like a second skin. I was always tired. He was always alert. He lived waiting for the next punishment in the form of silence, until one day I couldn't get out of bed. It was as if my body had given up too. I stood there, motionless, staring at the ceiling. And do you know what the narcissist did? Nothing. He got up, got ready for work, passed me and left, without saying a word. And at that moment I understood. He was never mute. He just chose not to see me. That day, lying there, alone, without the strength to cry, I finally understood that the narcissist's silence was not an absence. It was total presence, absolute control. Everything revolved around his silence. The house, my routine, my thoughts. I woke up and was already trying to guess if that would be a day of speech or a day of punishment. I observed the smallest gestures, the way he closed the bathroom door, the tone with which he placed the cup in the sink. Any detail became a sign. It was as if my life depended on deciphering that constant enigma. And the answer was always, "You are alone, Letitia." The deepest pain was living next to someone and not being seen. And worse, being erased on purpose. The narcissist knew exactly what he was doing. It was as if to say, "You only exist when I allow you." When he wanted something, he would talk again, with charm, with a soft voice, with that smile that deceived me from the beginning. But it was enough for me to show opinion, self-will, tiredness, and that's it. Silence. Again. I began to notice a pattern. He used silence whenever I put a limit. When I said it hurts me, when I asked for more affection, more presence, he froze. It was as if every attempt of mine to connect became a threat, and he reacted with the sharpest weapon he knew, indifference. I tried not to show that I was being affected. He tried to pretend to be natural, but inside, I imploded. The worst thing was not the silence itself. It was the doubt he planted. Am I really difficult? Am I asking too much? Am I ruining everything? In time, even my faith went away. I stopped praying. I felt that not even God heard me anymore, because even I couldn't hear myself. I was so busy trying not to bother, not to tease, not to be left in the vacuum, that I ceased to exist for myself. There was a time when his silence lasted a whole week, 7 days without a word. We lived together, shared the same roof, and yet I felt like a stranger. I talked to him and had no reaction. Only blank stares, only physical presence, nothing more. On the 6th day, I made an attempt. I cooked a dish he loved, set the table with care, even put on some low music, our old playlist. When he arrived, he saw everything tidy. I said in a low voice, "I did that for us." He looked at me, snorted, took the plate, took it to the living room and ate alone watching TV. I sat at the table, alone, listening to a song that now seemed to mock my hope. That night, I dreamed that I was screaming inside a dark room and no one listened. I woke up with my chest tight, my pillow wet with crying, and he, the narcissist, slept soundly, as if all was at peace. From then on, I started writing letters. I never delivered any, but it was the only way to keep my sanity. I wrote down everything I wanted to say, everything that hurt. Sometimes he signed as if he were talking to a Letitia of the future. Other times, as if I were talking to another woman stuck in the same cycle as me. And one day, I wrote the phrase that freed me. It's not that he doesn't know how to love. It's just that he chose not to love you, because that was it. The narcissist chose each silence. He knew that it broke me. I knew it made me crawl, apologize, accept crumbs. And even so, he continued. Not by carelessness, but for pleasure in controlling, for pleasure in seeing myself small. And the harshest truth? It's just that I allowed it, because his silence became the noise of my loneliness, and I didn't know how to live outside of that echo anymore. When I realized that I was more afraid of silence than fighting, I understood that I was no longer living. I was surviving the presence of a narcissist. There came a point when I didn't know what was worse. The days when the narcissist spoke to me in that cold tone, full of irony and superiority, or the days when he simply ignored me, as if I was not worthy of being heard. Both hurt me, but the silence was like a poison that entered in drops without me noticing, until I was completely intoxicated. I began to realize that my thoughts were no longer my own. Everything I thought about revolved around him. What to do to avoid getting angry, what to say to please, how to act so as not to provoke another cycle of silence. I policed myself all the time. Every word, every gesture, every choice was filtered by the possibility of being punished. And the cruelest? It was that, even when the narcissist returned to treat me well, I could no longer relax, because I knew it was temporary. I knew it was only a matter of time before the next silence. I was stepping on a ground that could crack at any second. There was a Sunday that was marked. We were having lunch. He was talking normally, even laughing. And me, there, smiling on the outside, but with my stomach turned, because I knew something would come. It always came. And that night, when I commented on an invitation from my cousin for a birthday, he simply got up from the table and went to his room. He locked the door. He didn't say anything else for 3 days. 3 days again, not knowing if I could send a message, not knowing if he was going to have dinner, not knowing if I should act as if nothing had happened, or if I should ask for forgiveness, even without knowing why. The narcissist never explained. He never said, "I'm hurt," or, "This bothered me." He just disappeared inside his own house. It left me alone with 1,000 questions and no answers. And in this cycle, I disappeared too. I left aside everything that gave me pleasure. I distanced myself from people. I stopped posting photos, accepting invitations, making plans. It was as if I was fading away little by little to fit in his absence. The few times I tried to confront him firmly, he returned to me with absolute coldness. "You are seeing problems where there is none. I'm just quiet. You are too sensitive." And that sentence became the sentence of my emotional prison, because I started to believe. I started to think that there really was something wrong with me, that maybe I was really unstable, exaggerated, dramatic. That maybe, who knows, the problem was me. That's when I realized that I didn't cry anymore, not by overcoming, but because I was dry inside, tired, numb, empty. One night, I went to sleep with him next to me. The narcissist lay down, took out his cell phone, scrolled for hours, without even saying "good night" to me. I was on my back, staring at the wall, my eyes open in the dark, and it was there that a phrase invaded my mind, as clear as it was cruel. Is this what my life is going to be forever? Sleeping next to someone who ignores me. Pretend that everything is fine. Apologize for wanting affection. Be afraid of silence. I found myself in my 50s, 60s, still there, in that bed, still trying to understand why he didn't talk to me. And in that thought, I felt such deep pain that my body trembled. I didn't want that. That was not love. That was punishment. And at that moment, even without strength, I started to think about a way out. I still didn't know how, but for the first time in a long time, I thought of myself. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't talk to friends. I didn't call my sister. But that night, for the first time in months, I opened the computer and searched how to get out of a relationship with a narcissist. The words scared me, because everything I read there, it was my life. Silent punishment, gaslighting, emotional erasure, cycle of idealization and devaluation. It was as if someone had written down my routine in detail, and that scared me, because for so long I thought it was my problem, that I was too sensitive, too emotional, too difficult. But no, I was just stuck in a cycle of abuse so subtle that no one saw it. I remained silent, as usual, but inside something began to move. I began to observe the narcissist with different eyes. Every time he ignored me, I didn't blame myself so much. Every time he went back to talking as if nothing had happened, I saw the manipulation behind it, and the spell was broken. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but breaking. There was a day when he tried to punish me again. I had commented that I was going to visit my mother. A quick visit, of a few hours. The narcissist said nothing. He only turned his face. And of course, the next day, he began another session of silence. I spoke to him at breakfast. He didn't respond. I made lunch. He ate quietly. When I tried to talk, he left the room. Everything is the same. But something in me reacted differently. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I didn't beg for attention. I just went about my day. I put on some music, did my work, and went to visit my mother as I had planned. When I returned, he was still silent. But for the first time, his silence didn't hurt. It annoyed me. And that's when I understood. His power over me was starting to crumble. The narcissist noticed. Of course he did. The next day, he spoke again. With kindness, with that charm that won me over at the beginning. He praised us, suggested we watch something together, and I, inside, understood the game. I understood that he used affection as currency, and silence as punishment, and that now, the game was failing. It wasn't easy. It wasn't yet. I was afraid to go out. Fear of the after. Fear of emptiness. Because as much as he hurt me, I was still addicted to the dynamic. He still confused the good moments with love. I still had flashes of hope, even though I knew, deep down, that they were traps. But I started planning, hidden, in silence, like someone preparing an escape from inside a locked room. I opened a separate bank account. I saved documents in hidden folders. I started to write down important passwords in an old notebook, camouflaged among books. I went back to talking to my sister, little by little, covertly. I was planting the seeds of my freedom without the narcissist noticing, and every time he ignored me, I wrote it down, not only in the mind, on paper itself. One day, he spent 19 hours without speaking to me because I had left the wet towel on the bed. The other day, there were 3 days of silence because I didn't respond to his message fast enough. I wrote everything, as evidence, but also as a way of not forgetting, because the narcissist was a master at making me doubt my memory, and the more I saw it on paper, the more strength I gained. Until one night, while he was sleeping, I sat on the sofa in the living room with a small suitcase next to me. The house was dark, silent, as always, but for the first time, that silence was mine. It was peace, raised. I looked at him one last time in the room, the man who taught me that the worst cry is the one that is never said, and I left, without saying a word. I left quietly because there was nothing more to say. The narcissist has always had the last word, or the lack thereof. This time, I chose not to give any further explanations, neither for him nor for me. The street was empty. It was dawn. I felt my heart racing in my chest, but it wasn't fear. It was something else. It was freedom still formless, still confused, as if my body wasn't sure if it was allowed to feel it. I walked to the taxi stand with a small suitcase, my cell phone in my hand, and a lump in my throat. I didn't cry. I didn't feel euphoria. It was like I was coming out of a long coma, as if he didn't know it was real yet. I went to my sister's house. I sent a short message. I've arrived. I just need to sleep. She received me in silence. A different silence. The one who welcomes, who respects, who embraces without having to touch. She asked no questions. He just prepared a mattress in the living room and covered me with an old blanket that still smelled like childhood. There, lying on that unfamiliar ground, with my eyes open in the dark, I thought that maybe it wasn't over yet, because the body leaves first, but the mind stays. She gets stuck in that pattern, in that sick logic of trying to predict someone's mood, of trying to deserve love. In the following days, the narcissist sent messages. Not many, but the ones that came were calculated. You ran away like a coward. Are you really going to throw away everything we've built? She didn't even have the courage to talk like an adult. No question about how I was. No word about pain. Just control. Only attack disguised as disappointment. I didn't answer. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. But because I knew that any answer was a reopening of the cycle. He didn't want to understand. He wanted to pull the rope again. I spent weeks listening to old songs and crying softly. I spent days feeling guilty, as if I had abandoned someone sick. The caregiver syndrome was still inside me. The idea that he needed me, that I was the only one capable of helping, of understanding, still haunted me. But then I read my notes again. The dates, the exact days when he silenced me. And I remembered, it wasn't love, it was control. Coming back for me was a slow process. In the beginning, I still walked around the house in silence, afraid of bothering her. He apologized before speaking. I felt guilty for smiling. It was as if he was still present, even far away. But, little by little, I began to take up space. I heard my laughter again. I went back to eating without haste. I went back to telling stories without waiting for judgment. I went back to talking about myself without fear of being silenced. That's it. That was my cure. Today, when I remember that relationship, I still feel pain, not because I miss it, but because I understand how much I erased myself to keep someone around. And that never again. The silence still scares me sometimes. When someone is quiet for too long, my heart races. My mind asks, did you do something wrong? But now I take a deep breath and answer to myself, you're not there anymore, Letitia. He can't shut you up anymore. And that answer, spoken in a low voice, is all I need. Today, I don't want any more explanations. Not his, not anyone else's. Because I learned that love is not silence. Love is presence. It is listening. It is welcoming. And what the narcissist gave me, it was punishment disguised as calm. I spent too much time trying to figure out what I did wrong. Too much time trying to be the right woman not to be punished with indifference. And in the end, I realized that no matter how hard you try to please a narcissist, the game is always going to be about control, never about love. It took me a while to forgive myself. I blamed myself for having accepted so much, for having stayed so long. But today, when I look back, I see the woman who survived, who, even silent, even unlit, even alone, he still found the strength to leave. He still shows up sometimes. An email, a new profile, a subtle attempt to reappear. Narcissists can't stand losing control, but I'm not that woman anymore. I don't need to prove anything anymore. I just need to remember who I am, and who I never want to be next to anyone again. I heard my voice again. I spoke again without fear of being punished. I came back into existence. And today, if you ask me what it's like to live next to a narcissist in silence, I'll only say one thing. It's like screaming every day inside a locked room and realizing that no one is going to open the door until you get up, unlock it, and walk away. And that's what I did. I left in silence. But for the first time, that silence was mine.